Hi, I'm Tim Zacharias with Cougar USA and your host of Building Value. It's been a while since we've posted an episode, but we have been hard at work still on the podcast, putting together this new studio in our new office and working on our next season for next year, where we're going to roll out a little bit different format and more consistent episodes. So really excited about that, but also excited about the episode we have for you today. So our guests are Carlos Flores, who's the Chief Plumbing Inspector for the City of Houston, and John Mata, who is Senior Director of Field Services for this region for IAPMO. So IAPMO is an organization that writes and distributes out codes for plumbing and mechanical, and the plumbing inspectors in the City of Houston obviously adopt those codes and then enforce them. So the City of Houston has recently adopted a newer version of the IAPMO code, and there's definitely some changes from what was in place to now. And so on this episode, we're going to talk through those and highlight some of those major changes, as well as provide a bunch of resources where you can go to find more information, and some of the common mistakes and things that can prolong projects or add additional costs. So hope you enjoy this episode and looking forward to see you on the next one. On Building Value, we go behind the scenes of building operations to showcase the people and products that make buildings work and the value they bring to the community. All right, gentlemen, Carlos, John, welcome to the Building Value podcast. Very excited to have you guys here in our new podcast studio. We were talking earlier about this table, and excited to have you guys here in our new setup on our nice old school drafting table here. So, Carlos, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more, give us a little bit of background about yourself and the City of Houston plumbing inspection.
All right. So I'm Carlos Flores, Division Manager for Plumbing Inspections with the City of Houston. I've been employed with the city for a little over 30 years now. 28 and a half of that is with plumbing inspections. And I've gone from being a plumbing inspector to a senior, which would be a field supervisor, the assistant chief, and in my current position now, otherwise known as the chief plumbing inspector.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a long service there with the City of Houston. We appreciate that.
No,
So
thank you.
Well, awesome. And John, welcome, sir. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate y'all having us here. I'm John Mata. I'm the Senior Director of Field Services for the IAPMO Group. I'm a lifelong Houstonian. I've been in the industry for over 35 years, so I've been there a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we started off as a plumber's apprentice, worked my way up to journeyman, and eventually became a project manager, and been with the IAPMO Group for 20 years now. Wow. Back in July. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a great run, and love all the changes that have come within the industry throughout the years. A lot has changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, glad to be here. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah, it is definitely, like you mentioned, it's ever-changing kind of environment now that with what's going on with the codes, what's being adopted. That's really what we want to get into today, is that there's been some new codes and standards that have been adopted by the City of Houston, and want to kind of go through some of what those are, how that's affecting everyone, going about construction, permitting, all of those good things. But before we jump into that, I think it'd be helpful to kind of understand what IAPMO is as an organization, and then how it kind of relates to the plumbing inspection. So can you just tell us a little bit about the IAPMO as a group and what you do?
Sure. IAPMO's been protecting the public health since 1926, so we're coming up on 100 years of existence in a couple of years. And, we operate on our flagship documents, the Uniform Plumbing and Uniform Mechanical Codes,
Yep.
Two codes that are adopted here in Houston as well as throughout the country and various municipalities around the state. We have a global team of experts that engage in industry and government to help a more safe built environment. What we try to do is get everybody to have a say-so in our code development process. And that's one of our slogans that we have: everyone has a voice and a vote.
Yep.
In our code, and that's not always the case with other code bodies. But our deep expertise in codes and standards is applied to our rigorous product testing and certification and our policy and advocacy work. So with IAPMO, we have roughly around 20 business units that we have under the IAPMO umbrella. Of across the board, and we're able to offer a diverse array of services from product certification to training and a number of, including backflow protection, which is big.
Yep.
We also help in the medical gas industry also on that. The med gas isn't the content in our code, so that's something that we've always looked to strive and with everything that we've had from licensing, the issues we've had in the last 5 years.
Sure.
It's very important to our industry to keep these codes and standards up to date and developed to the highest extent.
Absolutely. And so IAPMO as an organization is taking that input, like you said, taking multiple voices, and then building that into a code or a standard for either plumbing or mechanical. And then those codes can be adopted by City of Houston or
States,
any
it depends,
jurisdiction,
yeah.
right? And to enforce,
Yeah.
right? So that's kind of the relationship between the two.
Exactly. And I'll just say this, as far as the codes and standards are concerned, there's only 4 states in the country that each city or town can adopt either one of the 2 plumbing codes that are in existence to this day. And in Texas, we have 972 cities or towns, so each
Wow.
one so as you can see, my
They
area
can get scattered.
covers from New Mexico to Georgia along the south.
Oh,
But
wow.
I can just stay in Texas by myself, because the other states that I have, just like New Mexico, they're state authored codes. So they have it's all the fights done at the legislature, and it's over with right there.
Nice.
Unlike what Houston adopts, say Dallas doesn't adopt, San
Right.
Antonio and Austin. So
Right, and obviously there's some, Houston amendments that are special to the uniform, to the UPC, and we'll talk a little bit about
Sure.
that more later. But talk about all these different jurisdictions adopting code. I'm probably happy that Chicago's not in your area. You don't have to. I've heard they have some of their own.
them
I've
in
heard a couple
Philadelphia,
other jurisdictions.
Even
that-
New York has some
Kinda
ordinances that they still have from way back.
Right, kind of the Wild West of plumbing codes.
Yeah.
So you guys, and it's kind of on a regular basis, right? That you're updating and
The codes are
producing new
updated
codes,
every
right?
3 years.
Every 3 years.
Every 3
Okay.
years.
And then from a jurisdiction's perspective, though, a lot of times it's a little bit of a lag between when that code is kind of produced or approved to when it's adopted, right? So that's kind of when it would switch over to you, Carlos. So can you talk a little bit about what your team's doing and how it relates to the codes, and then we can kind of get into the latest adoption.
Okay, so the city unprecedented event last year in adopting the 2021 UPC and the UMC code. They did it in record time, and we've never had a code adoption done within a year or 18 months tops. And that was done with all the input from all the shareholders involved, including the city. So, and we're getting away from having too many of the city amendments and trying to go more base code.
Sure.
But there are certain areas that are unique to Houston that require us to kind of change up and amend the codes accordingly. So currently, I have not heard of any plans on adopting the 2024 yet, since we just did adopt the 2021 and
Right.
it just became effective this past January of this year. And we're still trying to, because there's minor changes in there that we're seeing more and more of as far as coming to our awareness, I guess you could say. But there are a few changes that in operation and in the code that will affect a lot of the commercial jobs.
Sure. And so when you're, I guess, let's say a typical new construction project is going out for bid or is looking to move forward in the city of Houston, at what points does your office get involved, and what are the things that y'all are looking for those approvals?
Okay, so for the inception of a project, it has to go through plan review. That's done through project docs, which you can go to houstonpermittingcenter.org and find that, and create your account and submit plans. Once the plans go through the approval process and they're set for building, then that's when my group comes into play. And just a lot of times, just because the plans went through plan review doesn't mean that it's perfect. There will be some instances where something got missed by accident, and so our inspectors are charged with knowing the code and also implementing it based on within the confines of the drawing as well.
Sure.
So just because it got approved on the drawings doesn't mean the contractors don't have to adhere to code. And so we had a meeting on that this morning that, it's incumbent upon our inspectors to make sure that they know what they're doing and know how to I guess, apply the code and not just follow the plans blindly. They need
Sure.
they need to know the code and say, okay, well, this item was missed. Unfortunately, it's subject to field verification, and so this is why we're making this call.
Yeah, there's a lot of times a big gap between what's on paper and what happens in the real world, right? So
Right.
you have to be able to bridge that.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a big gap, but there are certain situations where maybe a material that's not code approved was missed per se, and it's not a perfect process.
Sure.
But we have honed it down quite a bit since the first day that I started.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the 2021 codes that were recently adopted. And maybe both you guys can talk through this, but kind of what's that process look like for maybe the development a little bit, how City of Houston adopted it, and then what are some of those big things that have changed? John, why don't you start?
Well, like Carlos said, we had this is the first time that we've ever had an adoption come this quick before. And a lot of that, I'm not going to say, but I would say it's attributed to COVID. A lot of municipalities kind of went into a holding pattern. But that's not the case with the City of Houston, because when I first came on here, it took them 10 years just to get to the 2006.
Wow.
And that was from 2010, am I correct there,
I believe
Carlos?
so.
Yeah. And they just went from the 2000 to 2006. So.
Oh, wow.
So Houston's always been kind of a little bit behind, but I know municipalities around the state, due to COVID and budget constraints, they skipped a cycle. There was a lot of them that didn't adopt the 2018 at all. They just went from 2015, just like Houston did, to 2021.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so, and there are some changes in there that we have to address. The 21 has our new water demand calculator, which has residential. It's only for residential. Right now, we're in the process of creating one for the commercial, and we hope in the next, maybe a year or two, we'll have it out ready to go. Hopefully for the 27 when that comes up. But that's our new technology that we came up with, and it reduces pipe sizing, which will have impact fees for your meter. Good, you might not have to have the size meter you need. So, So that's our latest development in the code that's come on.
Yeah, the water demand calculator is great. Had Christoph on the on the podcast before. We've talked through that and some of the hot water design things as well. But we've talked about for a long time that Hunter's Curve has been out since I think it's the 60s, and
Before that,
even before then, so it's just been around for a long time in driving sizes, even though so many things have changed since that method came out. So to have something that's a little more recent and database is definitely a great new tool, and we'll be excited to test that out for the commercial world for sure. So, from your perspective, what was your involvement in that adoption of the 21, and what are you seeing kind of since the adoption?
So the process consisted of a bunch of different little task force, and so I was on the one for the plumbing, and I chaired that one. So the shareholders would submit, their proposals for consideration, and then our committee would look at it and determine whether or not it was something that we wanted to accept. Did it have merit? Did it bring value? And so that was part of that process. Once it came to us, and if we rejected that proposal, then the process would be that it would go to a resolution committee. And so we would testify to them in regards to our concerns and or approval of it. And so then what would happen then is if the resolution committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, because it's been a while now, but once the resolution committee made their decision, if they upheld our decision, then it kind of went away. And we would ask them maybe to resubmit, maybe word it differently. And then if the resolution committee determined that, this has merit, it has value, maybe revisit it. So there was one big topic that would keep coming back, and I think it came back to us about 3 or 4 times, and it concerned water softeners. And the backflow preventer requirement that the city had. That was an amendment special to us. And so I think it came to us about 3 or 4 times, went to resolution 3 times, and it just would not get resolved. So then it went to what they called the Code Modernization Committee, and they.
Which was the main committee?
Is the main, yeah, the main committee.
You had your subcommittees underneath, and the CCMC, Construction Code Modernization, was the final vote on
Okay.
everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the process isn't perfect, but we've learned a lot from that.
Sure.
Moving forward. And so out of that process, I mean, the voice, the value, everybody had a share in the decision-making process. So, you know, the code is kind of built on consensus. And so it was living up, the process kind of fostered that even more. And like I said, it was just unprecedented. I'd never seen anything like that happen here in all my time with the city. But there were some good changes, things that we need to hammer out and work out and maybe make it better for the next process. But I can see that process being adhered to again.
That's great. Well, you kind of piqued my interest, though, about the softeners and the backflows. What was the outcome?
Well, the outcome was we lost the battle on that one. So water softeners residentially do not any longer require a double check as prior codes would require. Commercially, however, which was a consensus or a compromise rather, commercially you still have to have it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and if I might, so just recently it came to light that Laredo, Texas was having to boil water. They were put on a boil water notice because of the presence of E. coli in the water system. And the whole time that we discussed this whole process or concern of the water softeners, it wasn't about the water softeners specifically for me. I was advocating for the protection of the city's water supply, as we're charged to do as plumbers and in accordance with TCEQ's requirements. So all that being said, Laredo recently was put on a boil water notice, and they attributed to 3 things, 2 of which had to do with their infrastructure, and 1 specifically to a water softener's backwash discharge. So I guess somebody had altered it maybe, or not installed it correctly to begin with, but the discharge was placed inside the clean-out riser. So, you know, that was one contention there that we were saying that needed to be addressed. We want to protect the city water supply. But, you know, maybe I didn't do a good enough job in explaining what we were after, advocating for it, but at the end of the day, we lost that battle. So I'm hoping now with what's happened in Laredo, maybe when we revisit this again, we'll have a different outcome. I'm hoping.
That's interesting. I mean, we just walked our water control lab out there, and we do have a softener. And one of the things that we noticed was when we were looking at the types of fill valves that we're using on top of the tank, it definitely impacted, you know, what size the softener needed to be, and then what that pressure drop across the backflow, all those things are going to be. So kind of back to the water demand calculator, getting that initial flow rate down, you can reduce the impact of a lot of those things downstream. Right. Because, you know, and from a, you know, energy savings and other things like having that pressure drop across the backflow can be a challenge. So if you do slow that flow down through those things, you can minimize that pressure drop and, you know, see a little bit better performance. So just kind of curious how, so it stays in place for commercial, but residential recommended, but not required.
So some of the discussion that was had was, you know, the water softener people were saying that it was impossible because of the hydraulics inside the tank to get the brine water back in the tank. I don't know that to be fact. I still have not, and I'm still researching it, still trying to figure out if I can find information on that. Because we were talking about back siphonage and back pressure.
Right.
So, yeah, you can have the siphonage at the clean out, at the discharge, but I was also concerned about the back pressure from the tank itself because and I don't want to, I guess I really shouldn't hammer all this out again, but I was very passionate about it and very disappointed when we lost it, so.
That's okay. No, I mean, this is great. That's why you're in the role, right? We want somebody that's, you know, like you said, fighting to protect the health of the plumbing system. So that's great. So, John, you have the
Oh, yeah. This is just one of our
pamphlets
that we have. It's a 2021, and if anybody needs any of these, you can contact me or here locally, or go to www.iapmo.org and request these. These are just, we put these out, and we got one for our mechanical code as well as our plumbing. And this just shows some of the key provisions in the code that changed, from one to another. I know I have, unfortunately, it says 2021.
I know, that's the 2024, we're skipping
I
ahead.
thought I had the other one, but it's basically the same thing, and not the same changes, but yeah. If anybody has any questions on that, we'd be glad to provide that.
So you mentioned the water main calculator, which is available on the IAPMO website,
Yep.
right? And we can link
And
to
it's
that.
and you can download the actual calculator for free.
Okay, great. It comes as Excel, right?
Yep.
And then you mentioned some changes on the water softeners. What are some of the other big things that came out of this? We can talk plumbing specifically, but if there's some things that you want to highlight on the mechanical as well, we can talk through those.
Okay, so one of the biggest changes is the elimination of a house tank for fire.
I've got a whole section on that right here.
Yeah, so there are some certain criteria that has
Yep.
to be met before you qualify, but if you meet that criteria, then in the design, then yeah, you wouldn't have to have a tank on that any longer.
So, and that's based on a flow test staying above 20 PSI, I believe,
Yes.
at 150% flow of the fire pump, I think is the
That's correct.
requirements. So if you stay above that, then you basically saying you don't need the house tank before the pump. But if you don't meet that, then it's leaning towards NFPA requirements for the sizing, right? So
Right.
it could eliminate the tank, but it could also mean a larger fire tank.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
Because the sizing method is a little bit different than what's been used in the past.
That's right. Now, you
Okay.
still need it for the domestic,
Sure.
but this speaks more specifically to the fire tank.
Right. Right. And so and that's going to apply equally to new construction as well as existing buildings?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, retrofit or brand new construction, it all falls to that new amendment.
Okay. Nice. So pass the flow test or follow the NFPA sizing guidelines for the fire tanks.
Right.
Okay. Yep. And we've got this is all info that we can link to and share as well.
Right.
So what's another big one?
Well, on the mechanical side, I could say that the 24 has the new ATL refrigerant that they have, and one of the things that's really was contested was its flammability that it has. And of course, what City of Houston did on the mechanical side is they extracted the language from the 24 and inserted it in the 2021 UMC, if I'm correct. We did that, yeah. And the reason we did that is because it's coming. My understanding as of January 1st, which is here a month and a half away, it's going to be like a federal. It's going to be federally required. So that's one of the things that we try to get ahead, even though we're not going to the 2024s. It's something that's there, but it does have a flammability, of course. They call it. It's very minute, they said, but it's one of the things that as a plumber, we look at anything that can be life safety, and we have to address it. So even though this is mechanical, this is one of the things that we are really looking at. So it's coming out, and I'll tell you, it's here. So.
Yep. So what about anything around, we're seeing a lot we already mentioned the water demand calculator and being able to reduce some of the demand or the piping sizes, things like that. Anything else around kind of water savings or stormwater, the way that we're dealing with stormwater? Anything touching else water on?
I don't know that there were major changes in that. Some of the changes that are impacting contractors right now is the requirement for trap primers. For years, we've allowed for the trap barriers or trap guards to be installed, but in essence, they're not replenishing the water in the trap. They're retarding the evaporation of the water, but not replenishing it. And if you look to their listing, their ASSE 1072, I believe it is, it's to basically just keep trash out of there. I mean, if you've ever done service, you know that mop strings, straws, all kinds of stuff find their way in a floor drain and in a P-trap. So that's a great product for that purpose, but unfortunately, according to the code that we adopted in 15 and now, it specifically calls for trap primers, and they're supposed to meet the ASSE 1018 requirement.
Okay. And is that on all P-traps, or what? Is there any specific that?
So only P-traps that are not going to have water frequently run through them. So basically, your floor drains, they're more utilized for spills,
Mopping.
mopping, accident, you have them in a kitchen in a wash down area. So those are traps that are not going to have water frequently run through them. So yeah, they'll have to have a trap primer. But if you have a hub drain with an AC condensate in it, perhaps, given certain circumstances, especially here since ACs run
Most of the time.
90% of the time, we're still going to require trap primers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly that evaporation can happen too. I mean, in our old office, we had a random floor drain, and it took us a little while to figure it out, but once we knew kind of that cycle, we had to go, refill it with water to keep that smell out. So
Right.
Okay, that's an interesting one.
Yep.
So anything around electrification or, seeing a lot more use of heat pumps for water heating or anything like that? Any sort of specific stuff around that in the code?
Geothermal is probably the one
Okay.
thing that they have, and we do have that in our code that we have addressed. And that's one of the things that we all see it every time we turn on the news. They're talking about, grant funding for, other types of energy that we can try to conserve on. And that's one of the things that's coming down. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's a geothermal apartment complex or something they're building on the east side. They were talking about it. They're talking about it right now. I read it in the paper somewhere. Supposed to be somewhere on the east side by where all the apartments are going.
Yep.
And they want to try to do something like that, and see how it works out, because it's one of the things that, if you drill down deep enough, there's an enormous amount untapped energy source down there that we haven't even thought about doing. So that's one of the things that we have in our mechanical code, and I'm proud to say that we're the only ones that have that language right now in our code, the content of our code.
Nice. Yeah, we've done at least one school that I can think of where it uses geothermal loop with heat pumps for the kind of heating and cooling in the
Sure.
in the school. So definitely already seeing it in place. But I mean, I think there's a huge potential for geothermal and even solar thermal potentially using those two together. So it's good to see that that's already being addressed.
And
in the
I can
upcoming
tell you that
codes.
one thing we're looking at also addressing, and it's probably not going to come out till the 27 code, is hydrogen and things like
Yep.
that in the mechanical, because that's another one that they're talking about, carbon capture and things of that nature.
Yeah, we're already seeing on different different boilers manufacturers saying they're hydrogen ready up to certain mixture, things like that. So we've seen that before where certain states move faster than others in some of their requirements, and so the manufacturers kind of piggyback on those, and so we'll see it kind of indirectly affecting us based on what's available from the manufacturers more so sometimes than what the it can move faster than the code adoption sometimes. So that happened with like the low NOx boilers.
Oh, yeah.
Those sort of things,
I remember that,
so
yeah.
so we're still kind of seeing that with some of the electrification that's happening in other states, not necessarily here. Indirectly we're seeing it through the manufacturers. So so definitely I'm sure it's going to be coming in the code adoptions after that. So so I'm curious, maybe it's not something specific to the latest adoptions, but what are some of the things that you see in a regular basis that trip up people in the code? Like maybe some common misconceptions or maybe some common things that you see people misinterpret in the code.
Oh, wow. That's a session all on
Yeah,
its
that's
own.
I guess one thing that I always get is just like you said, the misinterpretation. When I came up, I was always told we had 1,500 plumbers, and you'll get 1,500 different ways to do things, do plumbing. And that's similar to what the code is. It's how they address it. And that's one of the reasons why we develop a comprehensive code. We have one code book it tells everything for plumbing and mechanical systems. As a plumber, I know it's hard enough to get a plumber to look at one code book, much less a variety of books. So to go to one manual and get all the information they need is, it's very, very beneficial for someone in our industry.
Yep. Yeah. One source of truth.
Yep. So, you.
Yeah,
Carlos, you probably have some horror stories.
Oh,
about-
there's a lot of different things to pick on, but a lot of times it's for the contractor. It's just a lot of practical stuff that we've always had in place. Take for example the testing of groundwork. We're required a water test. The manufacturers do not recommend or allow air tests on
Pressure
PVC.
tests, yeah.
So we've strayed away from that, because I can remember when I first started, we would get 5-pound tests on PVC. Now you can still air test cast iron, but not PVC. I mean, for reasons that make sense. that somebody walks away, doesn't pay attention, you're creating a bomb.
Yep.
And so, it's all geared up around safety. Well, the biggest thing a lot of times is that the plumbers don't really, like you were talking about, going to the source and reading. They don't read up on the code. For years, we've always said they get a red tag education. They learn the code based on the rejections. And unfortunately, sometimes that kind of works for our inspectors as well, because they're used to being plumbers, and then they come here, and our part of what we do is changes. It's more specific to terminology and methodology, if you will. So trying to get all my guys on board to understand that it's about how it's written, and they'll say, well, I've had a plumber call me and say, is there any way they can not make the code so legalese? And I said, well, it's a legal document.
Right.
I mean, that's why the cities adopt them, and that's why our legal department reviews them before our adoption to make sure that legally it's following certain protocols. So, I mean, a lot of it, like I said, is pretty basic. It's no tests or people not home. And on that note, the contractors are welcome to call us between 7:15 and 8 in the morning, and they can get an AM or PM idea of when we're going to show up to do the inspections. However, I will say this, that we're extremely busy. We're running over 600 on average inspections a day, with about 22 to 24 inspectors, depending if they all show up on that day, they didn't get sick or what have you. But a lot of it can just be stopped with making sure the tests are on, making sure the projects are permitted properly. That's probably one of the biggest hang-ups for the contractors, not understanding that the plans were submitted, foundation, shell, core, and build out. And so the plumber will come in. In fact, we had one come to light yesterday that he spent almost $18,000 on a permit on the wrong project number.
Ooh.
So, I mean, it's just making sure that they do their due diligence to make sure that they're buying the permit on the right project number. And if I may, I would say that breakdown happens between the contractor, the building contractor, and the plumber. There has to be that communication that say, hey, we got all these project numbers, and this is what we need you to do, and then buy their permits accordingly.
Right. Yeah, I think we talked through that on the last episode too. So it seems like still
It has
an
been that
ongoing
way,
issue.
like I said, the whole time I've been there. A lot of the top 10 rejections would probably still be the same over 30 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's wild. So, it seems like education is a huge opportunity when it comes to the codes. So where can people go to find more information in general about the codes, or specifically about what City of Houston has adopted? So John, let's start.
Yeah, like I said earlier, if you go to the website, www.iapmo.org, you can navigate to we have an education tab there, and it'll tell you about courses. A lot of these are done online virtually. You can do that. You can also look at different seminars that we have. You can attend that if you don't want to, if you don't have the time to sit through an education. And we actually can customize any type of education for any type of group wanted. So if there's something like, in particular, sometimes the cities, after they adopt, they'll ask for a certain essentials course, which is basically an overview from the previous code to this one. We had to do this one for City of Houston. We had to jump 2 cycles. Normally we're just used to jumping one, but when you have to jump 2, it takes a little bit more involved. Sure. And that's one of the things we can do. So like I said, if you just go to our website or contact me, and I'll be able to provide my number if y'all can put it on this podcast.
Yep, absolutely.
My information, yeah. We'll get you taken care of.
That's great.
Yeah, as an organization, so we had the forethought when we adopted the 2015, we incorporated a lot of what was in the 18 that was changing. So we incorporated that into the 15. So the transition from the 15 to the 21 wasn't quite the leap everybody thinks that could have happened.
Sure.
But the City of Houston is taking action and providing workshops. In fact, I think we have one scheduled for Thursday, October 7th. Unfortunately, they've already reached their max capacity. They have seating for 180, and they've already sold that out, if you will. And then I think they're wanting to create another 20 or 40 seats. But to find out what workshops are coming up throughout the city, you can go to houstonpermittingcenter.org and sign up for a newsletter, and you can be notified of any upcoming training.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big opportunity, like we said, to get more education on it. And it seems like, that, what is it, the ounce of cures or ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, I think,
Yes,
right?
definitely.
So, learning some of the ins and outs of the changes and the code in general can save a lot of headaches down the road. So, guys, I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking through some of this stuff. Is there anything that we missed, or any other kind of final advice that you would have for the listeners today?
Well, for our inspection purposes, I mean, communication is the key. I jokingly will tell people, like in Cool Hand Luke, what we have here is a failure to communicate. So we're there to help, not hurt, is what I always tell a lot of the contractors. So if you have questions, feel free to call our number and reach out and speak to a field supervisor or ask for me specifically. And we'll try to help you navigate the permitting process and the inspection process and just general information.
That's great.
And from the code perspective, I would say just get involved. Get involved, become involved, put into this what you want to get out. I know it's not something we don't like. I was told that 36 years ago as an apprentice. You would have told me 36 years later I'd be a senior director for IAPMO, and I said no. But, we all have to grow up. So, I mean, with that being said, our code development process is an open consensus process. It's open to anybody from the journeyman apprentice in the ditch all the way to the code professional in the office to manufacturers. It's open to everybody. So, put into this, and that's what we thrive on.
That's great. Yeah, guys, Carlos, John, definitely appreciate you guys coming on today, sharing all this with us. We'll be sure to include links. There's a lot of things, a lot of sites we mentioned, but we'll put links to all of those when we get this out to everybody and get that information out. So, guys, really appreciate you being on. Enjoyed the conversation and appreciate all y'all are doing to kind of move our plumbing system forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. And also want to say thank you to all of you watching and listening to this episode of Building Value, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.